And welcome to the 2024 Hillsboro Speech Meet here on YourLiveEvent.com. My name is James Martins, and happy to have you along for the ride here as we have some students that we'd like to showcase here as we're going to do the preliminary rounds of Extemp. And this preliminary round being brought to you by Nodak Insurance Company of Hillsboro. For all your insurance questions, see Trail County's agents with answers. Agent Brad Richter in Hillsboro, Sales Associate Nick Preston in Mayville. We turn it over now to our first speaker, Jama Jama of West Fargo High School.
Ever since the Russo-Ukrainian War has began, there have been over 30,000 deaths within Ukraine. And Ukraine, the victims in this situation, are trying to do everything they can to salvage the situation. Whereas Russia, the aggressor, are absolutely relentless, and they're trying to do everything they can to win this war. And outside of a military response, Ukraine has attempted to do one thing and one thing only, and that's join the European Union. According to the House of the Common Library, just 4 days after the war began, Ukraine attempted to join the European Union. And over 2 years later, they still haven't been able to join. Yet, they've been trying incredibly hard to do so. And this is because of the potential benefits that they might reap from joining the European Union. And so this begs the question, how will EU membership benefit Ukraine? Well, the answer is they will finally have the capabilities of ending this war. And we know this is the answer because, as I'll explain this by 3 main parts. First, what has actually prevented Ukraine from joining the European Union? Second, we'll be looking at what has actually changed, allowing for Ukraine to join the European Union. And third, we'll be looking at the potential benefits, the benefits that they will reap from joining the European Union. Like I mentioned, Ukraine has been trying incredibly hard to join the European Union. And it's because of their current situation that they haven't been able to do so. In fact, according to CNBC, on an article published on January 8th, 2022, the country is at war, and several other nations are keen on joining the European Union. This is making it an incredibly hard process for Ukraine to join. So essentially, because of this current war itself, and because of the political implication of them joining the European Union might have on the world, it's made it incredibly hard for Ukraine to join, as the EU has to be incredibly cautious with how they move. Additionally, other countries want to join to reap the potential benefits joining the EU might have for themselves. And outside of issues stemming from the current situation, there have been issues plaguing Ukraine themselves for years that need to be addressed as well before they join. According to Politico, in an article published on May 12, 2022, even before the war, the nation was incredibly poor. Because of this, they have failed to integrate into the EU single market system and have failed to meet the EU's economic norms. So there are also economic issues plaguing the nation, failing them from actually joining the European Union, as they are too poor from joining. They are too poor, meaning that they aren't able to join. However, things have changed. December 14th, 2023 was marked an historic day by all Ukrainians. According to Atlantic Council, an article published on December 14, 2023, European leaders have finally agreed to start accession talks with Ukraine about joining the European Union. What this means is that they can finally join. European Union has finally started having talks with Ukraine about them joining the European Union instead of standing by and watching thousands upon thousands of Ukrainians die. Knowing this, actually, this didn't just happen and come out of thin air. Of course, Ukraine or European Union didn't just want them to join. Ukraine had to work incredibly hard to join, and that's what they did. According to the United States Institute for Peace, in an article published on December 15, 2023, the EU requires political and economic benchmarks to join, and Ukraine has met those benchmarks. It's a testament to Ukraine that they were able to do this in their current situation. So what this shows is that while in the midst of a war, the Ukrainians were able to improve upon their economy to the point where they met EU norms and have addressed all the current issues that are plaguing their nation, preventing them from joining the European Union. And so Now that we finally know that it's possible for Ukraine to join the European Union, we can finally start to look at the benefits it might reap for Ukraine itself. Now, first looking at the non-unique benefits that any nation will see from joining the European Union is, according to the European Union themselves, an article published just last year, a country will receive or will experience better political stability. They will have ensured freedom for all their citizens. They will have increased trade within their own country, as well as the fact that they will have a higher environmental standard. All benefits that will help Ukraine tremendously. And now looking at the more unique benefits, strictly to Ukraine, we can see, according to Katie Rupert, a UN commissioner, an article published on December 15, 2023, beyond the obvious social and economic benefits, EU membership locks Ukraine into Europe forever. This precludes any Russian influence on the area. What this means is that them joining the European Union will finally lead to the end of this war. By them joining the European Union, we'll have to finally stop standing by, and we'll have to take steps to intervene in this war and prevent Russian influence on a new fellow European Union nation. Now, knowing this will save many upon many of lives. According to Statista, an article published in February 2024, the death toll will only rise this year if this war were to continue. So by allowing for Ukraine to join, what this means is that we will save thousands upon thousands of lives. And now, wrapping this up, looking at the question, how will EU membership benefit Ukraine? Well, the answer is it will finally give them the capabilities of ending this war. And we know this because we first looked at what was actually preventing Ukraine from joining the European Union. Second, we looked at what has actually changed, allowing for Ukraine to join. And third, we looked at the potential benefits that Ukraine will reap from joining the European Union. Knowing that 30,000 people have died since the Ukrainian wars began, we can only hope and pray that the time Ukraine joins the European Union is incredibly soon. Thank you. You want me to?
You can look wherever you want. Okay. Again, you have 7 minutes. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. In February of 2021, Texas had a set of winter events that set records, including being the first billion-dollar weather disaster that year. Additionally, it was the coldest since December 1989, according to the National Centers for Environmental Information. This occurred because of Arctic oscillation, and this is where winds get mixed up. So mid-latitude lines, winds, and the Arctic and Pacific winds get mixed up, and therefore these hard-hitting winds from the Arctic and Pacific go down to the south, and that's why they had such a hard hit that winter. Another thing that causes this is the polar vortex. It is very similar to the Arctic oscillation that I mentioned before. However, this has way more extensive coverage of low pressure and cold air, and this is also what caused the hard-hitting winters in Texas. It was the longest freezing streak in the state, which lasted 8 days, 23 hours, and 23 minutes. Because of this, 10 million people were left in the dark, were lacking warmth, and lacked the ability to cook food, as well as their water pipes bursting. Water pipes bursting can be a very serious issue because it causes extensive damage to the environment and surrounding people, as we can see with extensive water damage, structural damage, and mold growth, according to Pearl Clean. So this leads us to the question of, will recent winter weather force states to invest more in hardening infrastructure against temperature extremes? And though this is contradictory to the Texas example that I used, the answer is actually no, because winters are actually getting warmer, and we should really be shifting our attention to the wildlife, wildfires, and water structure. So for the first point of how winters are getting warmer, usually when we think of winters, we think of sledding and we think of skating and snowboarding. However, this may not be something that we can look forward to anymore as time goes on. Many people have reported feeling that winters are getting warmer, and you're not crazy for this. As National Geographic states, winter is the fastest warming season in the United States compared to summer, spring, and autumn. This is making snowdrops turn more into raindrops, and this hurts the environment as well as people. 2023 was the hottest year on record, and according to a nature study, snowpacks in the northern hemisphere have been shrinking since 1980s, and this caused California to only have 7.5 inches of snow within their first snowfall this year, which is only 25% of the historical average. According to Liz Bentley, the chief ex-Royal Meteorological Society, she stated that temperature is going up and this is leading to less snow. Additionally, according to Andrew Schwartz, who is the lead scientist at VC Berkeley, he stated that a Central Sierra snow lab snow freeze winters by 2100, that snow will be evaporated and we'll only be seeing rainfall as a result of this. So snow is going to be down, and this is going to be a cause, not a symptom of climate change. And we're going to see that snow-free land actually absorbs more sunlight. That's going to lead into more warming of the global temperature. So for every Celsius degree that goes up, 7% of water vapor is absorbed. Now this leads us to wildlife. So as rain begins to freeze on the harder grounds because we're going to see a lack of snowfall, we're going to see that reindeers and caribou are actually going to have a harder time grazing on grass. And additionally, animals that use their white coats for camouflage, such as snowshoe hares and snowy owls, are going to be more inclined to predation, and their species are going to become extinct. Additionally, polar bears and Eucyan tube-nosed bats are going to have fewer options to build their snowy dens, and therefore these species who do not have the biological ability to adapt are going to become extinct. So according to the Endangered Species Coalition, each species loss triggers another species loss, and this is going to hurt our environment as well as humans themselves, because humans need a healthy ecology to purify the environment. So without these healthy forests, grasslands, rivers, oceans, and others, we're not going to see clean air, water, or land. Additionally, according to the Center for Biological Diversity, crop pollination, water purification, spiritual and cultural abilities are going to be lost within our environment, further hurting the society of our world right now. Additionally, another point is wildfires that are going to happen from these increasing temperatures. As air temperature warms, we're going to see trees releasing water more, and this is a state called evapotranspiration. And because there's no snow, trees aren't going to have a replacement of the lost moisture within their roots, and so forests are going to have a higher heat stress index, and therefore severe wildfires are going to be more likely. Wildfires are known to run fast and far, so according to the Central Sierra Snow Lab, they had the biggest winter of their season, and that led to a way smaller fire season, which backs up the claim. So environment, property, livestock, and human mortality rates are going to be losses here, according to the World Health Organization. And then finally, for the last point, water security. 1.9 billion people rely on snowcaps and glaciers for their water. Snowpacks are natural reservoirs. However, as we see snowpacks are going to be less abundant, rain is actually going to fall much more. However, as rain hits instantly on the ground, we can see that lots of this water is going to be wasted. Therefore, we cannot rely on something like this instead of snowpacks. However, we have no choice because of global warming. And therefore, infrastructure is not going to be a problem when we have to harden it, because instead infrastructure is designed around water as snow, and it's hard to manage with these wild swings. Therefore, the final conclusion for today is that we really do not need to harden infrastructure because winter is actually becoming warmer.
There's a lot you can tell from a president's Twitter page, from President Obama tweeting his hit summer playlist to Donald Trump not having a Twitter, and from President Biden tweeting his appreciation of the president of the Philippines with a wrong picture of a different Asian president. Yikes. And this mistake isn't just limited to his Twitter page. According to Reuters, in an article of December 2023, they report that that recently President Joe Biden has been accused for specifically bribery records as well as high demeanors and other high rates of other high crimes and misdemeanors. With the 2024 elections nearby and the Democrats making President Joe Biden their primary voter of the Democratic Party, this makes it essential that we ask the question of today. How will impeachment proceedings against President Joe Biden affect the course of the 2024 election? And it's clear it's going to change the power dynamics both for the Democratic Party, the Republican Party as well. And we can see this observed in three key main areas of analysis. One, we can look specifically how the Democratic Party is going to be affected by so. Second, we can look at what this means for voting lawmakers around the country and for current citizens in the United States. Third, we can look how the Republican Party will react to such impeachment process of President Joe Biden. And despite what you might think of the Republican Party trying to get President Joe Biden down with their current efforts to get President Trump elected, according to an article by Brown on March 2024, he explains that actually the Republican Party is not going to try to actually emphasize the impeachment process of President Joe Biden because it's likely going to hurt Mr. Donald Trump with his own accusations. This makes it clear that for the Democratic Party, they're not going to have such a high hit from the Republican Party. For now, they are going to stay under the low, and this likely means that President Joe Biden could find a way to smoothly recover for this, and this is essential for the Democratic Party if they want to win the 2024 elections. But despite the Republicans staying on the down low, the press is not. Because according to Jacques on September 2023, Jacques expands on the topic that specifically current press is highlighting the news of President Joe Biden. For the Democratic Party, this is imperative because if they want to get voters, they don't want this on highlight. However, for news coverage media, this is likely going to mean that for voters around the country, they're going to take a look at, instead of President Joe Biden, they're going to be looking at other Democratic runners. For Biden, this is likely going to have a detrimental effect on his current runnings. But that's not only one thing we can look on how will be affected. Let's actually look at the current citizens, leading to our second key areas of analysis, how this is going to affect the voting lawmakers. According to an article by PBS on January this year, PBS explains that due to current impeachment proceedings happening with President Joe Biden as well as Donald Trump, lawmakers around the country are looking towards a stricter voting process in order to eliminate actual misdemeanors as well as accidents during the voting process. For citizens around the country, this is going likely to mean that the actual proceedings are going to be stricter and enforcement of rules is going to be wider. For the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, this is going to mean that there's less leeway and most people will likely not want to vote if it's such high actual process, if it's a high process of truly going through the voting process. This makes it essential for both the Democratic and the Republican Party because the power dynamics are going to be shifted for both parties. No one is going to win here. But that's not the only thing we can look at. Let's look at how the Republican Party will work towards processing this impeachment process. According to an article by the New York Times in February this year, the New York Times explains that for the Republican Party, this is not an essential matter for them. Well, at least for Donald Trump anyways. Because the New York Times explains that recently Donald Trump's case might result him in a $310 million fine, and in addition, a ban on business proceedings in New York City. For Donald Trump, he has to worry about his current proceedings and current runnings going on in case and trial. This is not something of importance to him when he has his own problems. However, for the others of the Republican Party, despite the fact that a majority of them don't want to expand this problem for Biden because it'll also highlight Donald Trump's impeachment process in the past, That's not the entire Republican Party, because according to an article by the Foreign Affairs of March this year, the Foreign Affairs explains that the Republican Party is divided on how they should proceed with President Joe Biden. They explain that while on one hand they don't want to expand this topic into light, another part of the Republican Party wants to take this into their own matters and specifically highlight this issue in order to make it favorable for President Donald Trump in his current votings, meaning that for the Republican Party, this divide is going to be essential because a united party is essential if they are going to smoothly run in the 2024 elections. So when we return to the question of today, how will impeachment proceedings against President Joe Biden impact the course of the 2024 elections? It's clear it's going to change the power dynamics, in which one, we can observe for the Democratic Party, this is going to be an essential time for them to gain voters and an essential time to recover. Second, we can see that for voters around the country, this is going to mean a stricter voting process, and this is going to impact those who want to vote. Third, for the Republican Party, this means that there's going to be a divide among them, which is essential in recovering against Donald Trump's current past proceedings. So for the 2024 elections, you can expect some unexpected changes in the future.
And that concludes our preliminary round coverage of extemporaneous speaking on YourLiveEvent.com from the 2024 Hillsboro Speech Meet. The preliminary round's been brought to you by Nonak Insurance Company of Hillsboro and Mayville. For all your insurance questions, see Trail County's agents with answers. Agent Brad Richter in Hillsboro, sales associate Nick Preston in Mayville. We'll take a break. We'll keep the stream live. We'll come back at around 10:10 for the impromptu preliminary rounds on YourLiveEvent.com.
Keeps control for Thompson. Pass for Stevens, wide open underneath in the basket. Great pass.
Backs down, now kicks out up top to the left side, Caden Dahl. Dahl hesitates, then takes the three and knocks it home good. Dahl to get the turn. Carr trying to keep those legs underneath, then Cassette gets him down, and there's the pin.
Rebounded by Kendra Severson. Severson, here comes Bevins back the other way. Bevins, little contact, roll it in, good for Elena Bevins, and we're tied.
Through and Zeller with an excuse me bump, and here goes Semp for takeoff.
Alston Telephone Company and R&J Broadcasting Incorporated is proud to present to you this broadcast on YourLiveEvent.com.
And welcome back on YourLiveEvent.com. James Martin's here with you. We are into the second set of preliminary rounds. This is impromptu speaking, and this set of rounds is presented by Hepper Olson Architects of Buxton for nearly 25 years, helping design better futures for small towns in the tri-state area, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota. Impromptu speaking, each contestant will get a chance to look at two quotes. They can select a quote and then deliver a speech based on that. Our first competitor is Kaden Johnson from Central Valley.
Do what we do to keep going in life. Sometimes, however, in dark times, it is hard to find the happiness that will light our dark. The quote, "Happiness can be found in the darkest of times if only one remembers to turn on the light," by Albus Dumbledore, is a very inspirational and educational quote for life. In overall status, this quote can relate to many different things, especially if you are really down and it's hard to find happiness. And that is usually what happens when you're really sad. It's where you're trapped, you can't find the light to make you out of your stage or out of your sadness. And it really emphasizes all of the fact that people are in their darkness at times. And sometimes it's good to help them get their light. And sometimes it's also really important to find your own light. And if you don't find your light, you can end up losing stuff that's very valuable. You can end up losing something that's the most important thing in the world, your own life. If you don't find that light, the light will make you happy, and happiness helps you grow. And with that happiness and everything in general, it will really just remove the darkness out of your life. And the darkness is overall just going to put you down, and it's going to strike you down, and it's just going to continuously hurt and hurt and hurt until you find that light that will make you happy. With that light, you can shine away the dark, and you can efficiently get rid of the dark that is trying to put you down. And if you can do that, you can really destroy the evil that is within you and get rid of all of the stuff that is bugging you, and you'll get the best out of your life, and you'll also gain an understanding of life. As you go on, you will also still continue to see the dark, but if you can continue to find that light soon enough, you will live a happy life, and you will be very happy overall. And if you do stuff like that, and you find your light soon enough, you will be able to utilize that, and you will be able to find your light way sooner, and you'll be gaining the ability to find your light. And if you do that, you will be able to get work done faster. You'll be able to do things better. You'll be able to not be in a funk anymore. So overall, with finding the light in the darkness, if you do good at finding the light, you will succeed.
Again, that kicks off our preliminary rounds of impromptu speaking here on YourLiveEvent.com, presented by Hepper Olson Architects. I want to thank all of our sponsors as well for tournament manager Shayna Hess and Hillsboro head speech coach Rachel Fenner and the activities director Dave Nelson for all their assistance in helping us get this new event, a Your Live event, off the ground. We'll continue here with more on impromptu speaking, rather, as the students come in. Part of 14 categories that the students can participate in. Again, due to certain guidelines, we're only able to broadcast a few of those events. So we broadcasted earlier this morning the extent preliminary rounds, and later on this afternoon we'll have the final rounds for Inform and Persuade. Again, just glad to be here at Hillsboro High School again for our 2024 Hillsboro Speech Meet coverage on YourLiveEvent.com. We should have our next student here in a moment.
we all have to fail sometimes to be able to succeed. This is something that we are taught from a young age because it is important to learn this fundamental idea that we have to be able to fail to actually succeed within life because we can't be perfect all the time. And so, as Babe Ruth says, never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. We can interpret this quote today as failure shouldn't scare you from trying. We will see this exemplified through our 3 points today. First, we are going to go back in time and look at Thomas Edison and the creation of the light bulb. Next, we're going to move to the modern day and address the coronavirus pandemic and how we persevered throughout that time. And then finally, we are going to look to the fictional example of Zootopia, specifically the main character, Judy Hopps. First, we can look to our first example of Thomas Edison. Back in the past, when we didn't have light bulbs, we had to use other forms of ways to heat our houses and keep the light on. But since Thomas Edison's creation of the light bulb, we have seen electricity revolutionized within the present day. But this wouldn't have happened if Thomas Edison had quit after his first failure. He failed many times and made many different prototypes for the light bulb, but that didn't discourage him from continuing to find a source for people all over the world to use for light. And so Thomas Edison is a great example of where we see perseverance through failure within the past. Because he was able to overcome his adversities and figure out his failures, he was able to create the light bulb, which was revolutionary for its time and continues to be an asset that many of us have today. Next, we can look to coronavirus, specifically the COVID pandemic, where many people were impacted due to its issues. Many people contracted the virus and had to continue persevering, but specifically looking to the doctors and the creation of the vaccine, we see that this was no easy feat. It was a lot of trial and error for scientists to find ways to prevent the coronavirus from occurring within people, and for doctors to be brave enough to continue to go into rooms even after losing many people within hospitals. And so while we don't always realize how many people lost their lives to the coronavirus pandemic, it is still important to recognize them and see how because of the doctors treating them and the scientists that created the vaccine, we see now that more people can survive it because they didn't give up with failure. We saw many failures as seen with many people dying and many innovations not working to prevent the coronavirus from being contracted, but we still see that through the quote today, they didn't let failure scare them away from trying. They persevered and saw fruition of their ideas and were able to keep everyone now safer from the coronavirus pandemic. And so now we can conclude with the fictional example of Zootopia. We all know the Disney movie Zootopia, where it features the city where anyone can be anything, even if it's a different animal. And so we look to the main character specifically, Judy Hopps, and how she had a great big dream from the beginning of the film. She wanted to become a police officer, but they had never seen a bunny police officer before. This was important because she was going to be the first of her kind to become a police officer and do the impossible. And while she failed many times as seen through the scenes of her training where she wasn't successful at first, but because she kept persevering and didn't let failure scare her, she was able to overcome the rest of the people within her class and become the valedictorian of her police academy. And so we see that through the quote today, Judy Hopps showed the exact meaning of the quote today, not letting failure scare you because she wanted to keep doing her dream. And so we have to never let failure scare us from trying, because as Babe Ruth tells us, we have to never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. As we saw this quote exemplified through 3 examples, we first discussed Thomas Edison and how he created the light bulb for everyone to use, despite his many failures. We then looked at the coronavirus pandemic and how the creation of vaccine and the treatment administered to patients wasn't always successful, but it eventually was because doctors and scientists overcame adversity and kept persevering. And finally, Judy Hopps, the first of her kind, was able to become a police officer. All of these demonstrate how we have to try, even though we might fail.
The quote that I got today is by Albus Dumbledore, the famous person in the Harry Potter film series. And his quote is, "Happiness can be found in the darkest of times, if only one remembers to turn on the light." This quote is famous. There are so many different ideas or interpretations of it, but to me, it means you must always be positive. Don't let life get you down. So many things can happen to your life, but you are the one that decides how you take the situation, how to make it better, how to grow from it. We can see this in 3 examples today. My first one is going to be the Hunger Games. Then we're going to move on to the depression before finally going in to mourning of a loved one. So, moving on to my first point, the Hunger Games. We all know the film series, Hunger Games, Harry Potter, both very popular, but let's look at Hunger Games. Hunger Games, it's such a hard and horrible time for these people. They are being chosen to be killed. But people, they must look at the light of things that's happening. Primrose, Katniss' sister, specifically does this. She's always looking on the better side. She's taking care of her cat. She is baking. She's helping her mom cook. She is doing these little things to try to get the best out of the situation she's in, even though she's in such a hard life. And obviously, you can't always be positive, but it's what you do with those moments. When you're in those darkest moments, if you can find the light shining, if you can see it underneath the door, you must take that light and you must follow it. And with that light, you can go and see more. That is exactly what Katniss did later on in the films. She realized what the problem was happening, so then she changed it. She went to the Capitol. She made a movement. She made that darkness for everyone. She made it into that lightness. She turned on the lights. Now, moving on into my second point about the Great Depression in the 20s. During the Great Depression, there was obviously food shortages all over, so they made this one thing, wacky cake. There was no dairy products in it. It was made with oil, so there was no eggs and there was no milk. This is because they had such shorthand of these things. But people still wanted cake, obviously. So they took the world around them and they adapted it. They adapted into the things that they still wanted to eat, but they couldn't get it. So then they made wacky cake. It's just a lovely little chocolate fudge cake. And they made the best of the possible situation that they could have. And it worked out for them in the end, and eventually they got out of the horrible situation of the depressions, but yet we still have wacky cake around today because, honestly, it's pretty good. And now, moving on to my last point about mourning a loved one. Recently, my grandma got diagnosed with dementia. This is horrible and sad, but you have to be positive. You have to know that there's lightness on the other side. You need to think and remember on the loved one that you've lost and understand. But you must realize there is a lightness on the other side. But no one's going to find that for you. You must find that light. You must find it within yourself to prevail, to move on, to go towards the light. You can't get stuck in the darkness. Your loved one would not want you to get stuck in that darkness. They would want you to go and be the best person you possibly can be. Today, with this quote by Albus Dumbledore, happiness can be found in the darkest of times, if only one remembers to turn on this light. Today I explained what this quote means to me, but I have to be positive. You just can't let life get you down. You need to look and find that light shining and follow it. I explained this with 3 points today. 1, about Hunger Games, how Primrose looked towards the light. Then I went on to explain about Katniss and what she did to change the world. She followed that light. And then we went on to explain about the Great Depression and wacky cake, before finally looking up about how you can use this when you're mourning someone. How you must know. You have to be positive. You must live your life at its fullest.
The trials and tribulations of life are simply inevitable. When you're in that dark moment, when you made a mistake, whether you regret something within your life, there's always going to be simply a dark moment within your life. However, that dark moment can either define you or you can define yourself from that dark moment. Because when you sit and dwell in a dark moment, when you let it get to you, it eats at you and it can take away from you. But when you overcome that darkness, when you turn that light on, ultimately you can prove to yourself that you are a stronger person now more than ever. The quotation from Albus Dumbledore, "Happiness can be found in the darkest of times if one remembers to turn on the light," perfectly encapsulates the idea of resilience. When you're in that dark moment, if you simply dwell on a happy time, if you remind yourself that times do in fact get better, you can overcome that dark spot in your life. I will be connecting this quotation to 3 key points here today. First, we look at the historical figure and civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. and his time of darkness within American history. Next, we look to a more fictional story, one in a Japanese animated series as well as a Japanese cartoon called One Piece. And finally, we look to a more personal connection in my dark time in which I was at a bad and low point within my life, but I had my friend help me lift out of it and turn that light on. Bringing me to my first connection. We look to the historical figure and civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. has rightfully earned his place in history as a courageous leader and a resilient figure who fought against systematic oppression within America. His "I Have a Dream" speech is one of the most documented speeches in history at the Lincoln Memorial, in which he spoke to millions of individuals around America, talking about his dream for equality in the future. Now, this darkness that the quotation refers to is, of course, this period of time, as Jim Crow laws were still full in swing and segregation was still the social norm across America. We can see that this is, of course, a dark spot. There is nothing right about this. Treating individuals differently simply based on the color of their skin has always been wrong. But this was a norm within America. It was a tradition. The hate ingrained within individuals' hearts and minds was so ingrained that they simply could not rid of it. And that was why the systematic oppression was still full in swing at this period of time. But Martin Luther King Jr. didn't let that discourage him. Instead, he fought against that. He let it motivate him because he knew that as long as there were those dark spots, if he remembered to turn on the light, it would dissipate. And his turning on the light was being the spearhead figure in the civil rights movement. He led that charge against systematic oppression and segregation within America and eventually overcame it because he shone through that light. He shone through the darkness. He turned on that light and he was that spearhead for many others. And he didn't just turn on the light for himself, he turned on the light for America. Now we move on to our second connection. We look to the fictional story of One Piece. One Piece is a world of a vast ocean, comprised of many tiny thousands of different islands. However, they all have one thing in common, and that is the overarching world government. Now, the world government is highly oppressive. They speak out against those who speak out against them, they silence oppression, and they all ultimately oppress individuals and citizens of different islands. But there is the main character, Luffy. He is the Pirate King after all. He and his goal is to become the Pirate King. He starts off as a little boy. He has a dream of becoming the freest man of all and spreading that freedom throughout the world. Now, most notably, he makes friends along the way. And those are his crew members, as well as liberating different islands and overthrowing their oppressive and tyrannical dictators. Now, he does this through fighting them, and of course, that's violent, but in that dark spot within those areas, we look to most notably an island called Dressrosa, which was dominated by a tyrannical ruler who had powers to turn people into toys. But when they were turned into toys, anybody who had connections with them forgot about them. This dark spot within those individuals' lives, they could not speak, they couldn't think. They were stuck inside their own head. But Luffy was able to overcome that and defeat that ruler and brought freedom to that island, showing that darkness is not the deciding factor of your life. The deciding factor is how you respond to that darkness. Luffy was able to turn on that light and bring back hope to the people of Dressrosa. And eventually he liberated them, overthrew that tyrannical dictator, and overcame the oppression within that island, showing that as long as you turn on the darkness, or as long as you turn on the light, the darkness can dissipate. We now bring it to a final connection, a more personal one. A while back in 8th grade and going into freshman year, I was at a dark spot in my life. I was depressed, I was anxious, and I didn't seem to have a lot of friends. And this was, of course, during when COVID was full in swing, so quarantine made it very hard to socialize. And I lost my spark a little bit. I couldn't really connect with others as well, and ultimately talking to individuals was kind of hard, and that brought about a serious bout of depression. However, I didn't respond by staying there. At first, of course, I thought, well, this will never end. My life will just be the monotonous and boring journey it always has been. But I overcame that because I turned on that light. I connected with a friend, and they connected with their friends, and eventually it built into more or less a snowball in which I had many friends to fall back on, and ultimately built a community for myself. I built a social network for myself, because I knew that the darkness was there at that moment. I knew that that darkness wouldn't go away, maybe even tomorrow or the day after that. But we can see that ultimately when I turned that light on by connecting with individuals, by making that first step forward, I was able to dissipate that darkness. And that is ultimately what Albus Dumbledore is trying to conclude here. So in conclusion, when looking at the quotation, happiness can be found in the darkest of times if only one remembers to turn on the light by Albus Dumbledore, we see the main clear theme here is resilience. It's determination and courage, as well as bravery. This was demonstrated through the three connections here today. We looked at Martin Luther King Jr., the heroic civil rights activist who brought about light to the dark period of time within American history. Then we looked at the fictional story in which Luffy fought against the oppressive world government and tyrannical dictators of different islands and brought about freedom and that light to those dark areas. And finally, we looked to a more personal connection in which I was at a dark spot in my life, but I had myself turn on the light with the help of others, which were friends. So the overall message here and the clear theme is resilience, courage, and friendship.
Again, you're viewing the preliminary rounds, round number one for Impromptu on yourliveevent.com. We are waiting one more speaker, we do believe. Here again, this round presented by Hepper Olson Architects. A reminder that following the conclusion of this round, you can go back and see the extemp preliminary round earlier this morning that we broadcasted. And then later on this afternoon, approximately 1:30, 2:45, we'll have the final rounds for Inform and Persuade. So come on back for that here. But again, thanks to all of our sponsors, to everyone that made these broadcasts possible. Again, Impromptu, one of 14 categories that these teams are competing in today. There are, I believe, 10 schools here today. Park River, Mayport, CG, West Fargo High, Grafton, Drayton, North Border, Thompson, West Fargo Horse, and of course Hillsboro and Central Valley are participating in the tournament. And again, we are able to broadcast certain events, but unfortunately it does not look like we'll be able to broadcast any with Hillsboro today, as they are all in interpretation events. So that is what we have for you today. Just a little bit of housekeeping notes here on yourliveevent.com. And again, Impromptu speaking, as you have seen, the individuals, they get a chance to look at two different quotes. They have not seen the quotes before this round. They look at the quotes, and they contrive a speech based on that, and they have 7 total minutes to prepare and speak on those particular quotes. So awesome stuff there for those kids. Again, we are awaiting just one more speaker here in this impromptu preliminary round and the 2024 Hillsboro Speech Meet broadcasts on yourliveevent.com. Again, thanks for tuning in to our live coverage of the Hillsboro Speech Meet on YourLiveEvent.com. Again, still waiting on our final speaker to arrive, and a lot of these students, they can enter multiple events. I believe they can, in individual tournaments, they can really enter up to 7, 8 events. They can qualify in as many as 4, I do believe, to the state tournament, and or qualify for 2, I should say, the state tournament, and they can have up to 4 speakers from a school. So. And so again, the 14 categories, there are a lot of interpretation categories, and then 4 of the 6 that we were able to do today. Again, extemp and impromptu for the preliminaries. And as well, we have Inform and Persuade finals later on this afternoon about 1:30, 2:45. Radio and Entertain round out the more original speeches. Also plenty of interpretation events like dramatic interp, humorous interp, serious interp, duo interpretation, as well as poetry, extemporaneous program reading, and storytelling as well. In there. So lots of different events for individuals to test out their speaking skills a little bit. And, of course, I'd recommend it as you need to speak. So great stuff. We're able to do this again because of our many sponsors, so thank you for them. Thanks again for Shayna Hess, the tournament manager, Rachel Fenner, the Hillsboro speech coach, Dave Nelson, the athletic director here at Hillsboro, for giving us the go-ahead to try this out here on YourLiveEvent.com. Again, waiting for one last speaker in our impromptu preliminary rounds, and I'll wrap up our preliminary round coverage on YourLiveEvent.com. And we're still awaiting our final speaker, so it looks like, again, this individual is multi-entered, so they might make accommodations to get his round in and possibly in another room. Then will wrap up our coverage of preliminary rounds on yourliveevent.com from the 2024 Hillsboro Speech Meet. The impromptu rounds, impromptu speakers were presented by Hepper Olson Architects of Buxton, helping design better communities for nearly 25 years in the North Dakota, South Dakota, and Minnesota areas. So why don't you come on back here at about 1:30, 2:45-ish for back-to-back finals featuring Speech to Inform and Speech to Persuade. I'll come back for the finals later on yourliveevent.com, but for now, this is James Martins saying speech bands show some pride.